The dusty air of the small, western town swirled under the blazing sun as the crowd gathered around the wooden platform known to everyone as the auction block. Today the atmosphere was heavier than usual, not because of cattle or land changing hands, but because a woman, a grieving widow, was to be auctioned off like property. Her husband had died owing debts to powerful men in town, and since she had no family to protect her, the cruel custom of the frontier demanded repayment in the most heartless of ways. She stood trembling on the rough planks, tears streaming silently down her pale cheeks, her hands folded tightly as though in prayer. Her faded blue dress clung to her thin frame, the dust of the town settling over her like a shroud, and her wide eyes scanned the crowd, not for mercy, for she had long given up on finding that, but for a sign that someone might see her as more than a burden. The auctioneer's booming voice cut through the murmur of the crowd, announcing her like livestock, his words harsh and hollow. This young widow, strong enough for work, decent enough for company. Debts attached, who'll start the bidding? Men leaned in closer, some whispering to each other, others smirking at the thought of owning a woman who had already suffered so much. The bid started low, like vultures circling, and with each number called, the widow's heart sank further. She clenched her fists and tried not to collapse under the weight of humiliation. The crowd pressed in, eyes staring, some cruel, some indifferent. It seemed no one cared that she was a person, not property, and the whispers of laughter struck her like daggers. But at the edge of the crowd, standing taller than most, was a cowboy whose presence had gone unnoticed until now. He was rugged, broad-shouldered, his hat tilted low against the sun, and his hand rested on the buckle of his worn belt. He had been watching, silent and still, his dark eyes fixed not on the auctioneer but on the woman herself. He saw her pain, the tears she tried to hide, the dignity she clung to even as the world stripped her of it, and something inside him shifted. The bidding rose higher, men calling out numbers with greedy anticipation, and the widow's chest heaved with each shout. She wondered if her life would now belong to the cruelest hand in the crowd. The auctioneer barked louder, slamming his hand on the wooden post, urging more offers. Just as another man shouted a number, a deep voice rolled through the air like thunder. "I'll pay double." Silence fell. Heads turned. The cowboy stepped forward, the sunlight catching the dust on his coat. His eyes never left hers. "Double the highest bid," he said again, his voice calm, commanding, leaving no room for argument. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some men grumbled, others scoffed, but no one dared to outbid him. The auctioneer blinked, then stammered, "Sold?" And with that the hammer fell and the cowboy had claimed her fate. The widow stood frozen, unsure if relief or fear should take her. This stranger, this man who had just bought her freedom from the others, now walked toward the block. He reached up, his rough hand surprisingly gentle as he helped her down. "You're safe now," he whispered, low enough for only her to hear. She blinked, confused. Safe? What did that mean in a world where no woman was ever truly free? Yet something in his gaze told her he meant it. The crowd dispersed reluctantly, disappointment and gossip hanging in the air. But the cowboy didn't care. He guided her away from the eyes that had burned her with shame, walking toward the quiet edge of town. For the first time in what felt like forever, she took a full breath, though her heart still pounded with fear. She finally asked, her voice trembling, Why would you do that? You don't even know me." He stopped, turned to her, and tipped his hat back so she could see his face clearly. His eyes were steady, filled with something she had not seen in anyone for so long, compassion. "Because no one deserves to be treated like property," he said firmly. "You've lost enough. No man here was going to give you a life worth living. I won't see you suffer like that." Tears welled in her eyes again, but these were different from the ones she had shed on the block. These were tears of fragile hope, a spark she thought had been extinguished forever. He placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and reassuring. "From this day forward," he continued, his voice steady and unwavering, "you're not theirs, you're not for sale, and you're not alone. You're mine. Not as property, but as someone I'll protect for the rest of my days. You're mine forever." The words struck her like a promise carved into stone. For the first time she felt the weight of her chains lifting, not because of ownership, but because of the strange, unshakable certainty in his voice. She searched his face, trying to find the catch, but there was none. Just a cowboy with a strong will and a heart big enough to save her. The story of that day spread quickly through the town, whispered in saloons and markets, Some mocked him, others admired him, but the widow didn't care anymore. For the first time in years, she had a chance to live, not just survive. And as the two of them rode out toward the horizon, she felt the wind on her face and the warmth of the setting sun, and she dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, destiny had given her a second chance. Her life was no longer defined by tears, debts, or loss. It was now tied to the courage of one man who chose compassion over cruelty, love over greed, and together their story would become a legend, a tale of redemption, love, and the power of standing against the darkness. And dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, if you believe in courage, love, and second chances, then I invite you to subscribe to this channel.